Well, you never know, but I knew going into the 93 season that they were very good in 91 and 92. So I knew that. And I knew they had the same players coming back, and the pitching staff was pretty young, and that they were all going to be together for a while. You know, Glavine, Smoltz, Avery, Pete Smith, Kent Marker, all those guys. So they were all young. I know the owner would keep the team together, and luckily we continued to win. I was sitting at home not too long ago when somebody asked me a question that caught me off guard. He said, "Greg, you've played against some of the greatest players who ever lived. Which ones did you admire the most?" At first, I thought it would be an easy question. Then I realized it wasn't. See, if you ask me who the greatest players were, that's a different conversation. Everybody has an opinion on that. Fans argue about it. Players argue about it. Half the time, nobody changes their mind anyway. But admiration is different. Admiration is personal. The players you admire aren't always the ones with the biggest statistics. Sometimes they're the guys who made you stop and pay attention. Sometimes they're the guys who taught you something without ever trying to. Sometimes they're the players you couldn't wait to watch, even when they were standing in the opposite dugout. I was lucky. I spent my career in a time when baseball was full of incredible talent. Every season seemed to bring another future Hall of Famer. Every road trip felt like there was somebody new giving pitchers nightmares. And when you're competing against people like that year after year, you start noticing things. You notice who prepares harder than everyone else. You notice who never changes no matter how famous they become. You notice who makes the game look easier than it really is. Most of all, you notice the players who earn your respect long before they earn your friendship. When I started thinking about that question, a few names immediately came to mind. I didn't look up statistics. I didn't compare awards. I just thought about the players who left the strongest impression on me over the years. Some of them were hitters. One was a fellow pitcher. All of them were different, but every one of them made me appreciate baseball a little more than I already did. And the first player I thought about was a guy who spent a lot of years making my job a lot harder than I wanted it to be. Tony Gwynn. The first time I faced Tony Gwynn, I walked off the mound feeling a little confused. That's not something pitchers like to admit. Usually when a hitter gets a hit, you know what happened. Maybe you left the ball over the plate, maybe you missed your spot, maybe you fell behind in the count. Against Tony, it wasn't always that simple. I remember throwing a pitch exactly where I wanted it. The location was good, the plan was good, everything felt right. A second later, the ball was rolling through the infield for a base hit. I just stared for a moment and thought, how did he get to that pitch? That became a familiar feeling over the years. What impressed me about Tony wasn't his power. It wasn't even the batting titles. It was how difficult he made every single at-bat. Some hitters looked like they were trying to beat you with one swing. Tony looked like he was having a conversation with you. Every pitch meant something. Every adjustment mattered. You could almost see him thinking, the older I got, the more I appreciated that part of his game. Baseball is full of talented people. Talent gets your attention. Preparation earns your respect. Tony was one of those players who seemed completely dedicated to his craft. You could tell he loved hitting, not just the results, the actual process of it. I remember seeing him before games, talking baseball, studying pitchers, thinking about details most people would never notice. That's what always stood out to me. He cared, and players noticed those things. Years later, when people ask me about the hitters I remember most, Tony's name always finds its way into the conversation. Not because he intimidated me, not because he hit the most home runs, but because every time I saw him walking toward home plate, I knew I was about to face somebody who respected the game as much as I did. And that's something I always admired. I remember getting to the ballpark early one afternoon and seeing Cal already out on the field. The funny thing is, that wasn't unusual. In fact, after a while, it became exactly what I expected. No matter what city we were in, no matter what month it was, Cal always seemed to be there before everyone else. stretching, taking ground balls, working on something. Nothing dramatic, just working. People usually start talking about the streak when they talk about Cal. I understand why. It's one of those records that almost doesn't seem real anymore. But when I think about him, that's not the first thing that comes to mind. I think about consistency. Baseball is a hard game because it asks you to do the same things over and over again for months at a time. Anybody can be motivated on opening day. Anybody can be excited when things are going well. The real challenge comes in the middle of the season. The long road trips, the bad games, the days when your body hurts and you're tired of airplanes and hotels. That's where character shows up. And every time I saw Cal, he looked exactly the same. Focused, prepared, ready to play. I always respected that. One thing players notice is who loves the work, not the attention, not the headlines, the work itself. Cal loved the work. You could see it in the way he prepared. You could see it in the way he carried himself. He never acted like somebody who had already accomplished enough. He always looked like somebody trying to get better. The older I got, the more I appreciated people like that. Talent can make you famous. Discipline keeps you there. When I think about Cal Ripken Jr. now, I don't picture records or ceremonies. I picture a quiet afternoon at the ballpark and a guy already out on the field before everyone else. Somehow that tells me everything I need to know about him. The first time I really watched Ken Griffey Jr., I remember looking around the dugout because I wanted to know if everyone else was seeing the same thing I was. Some players look great because they work harder than everyone else. Some players look great because they're stronger than everyone else. Griffey just looked natural. Everything seemed easy. The swing looked easy. Running looked easy. Catching fly balls looked easy. Even when he hit a ball halfway into the seats, it never looked like he was swinging very hard. I think that's what amazed people. Baseball is a difficult game. The best players in the world fail all the time. Yet somehow, Griffey had a way of making the game look simple. I always admired that. But what stayed with me wasn't the home runs. It wasn't the highlights. It was the way he seemed to enjoy every minute of it. There are a lot of pressures in professional baseball. The longer you play, the heavier those pressures become. Expectations follow you everywhere. Reporters follow you everywhere. Fans expect something special every night. That can wear people down. For some reason, it never seemed to change Griffey. Whenever I saw him, he looked like a kid who still loved coming to the ballpark. And I think fans felt that too. I remember arriving early for batting practice one day and seeing people already gathering in the stands just to watch him hit. The game hadn't started. The stadium wasn't full, but they wanted to watch Griffey take swings. That's a pretty special thing. The older I got, the more I appreciated players who never lost their love for the game. Griffey was one of those players. When I think about him today, I don't immediately remember a specific home run or a specific catch. I remember the smile. I remember the energy, and I remember a player who reminded everybody around him why baseball was supposed to be fun. That's why Ken Griffey Jr. will always be one of the players I admired most. I remember sitting in pitching meetings before a series against the Giants, and no matter how the conversation started, it usually ended up in the same place. Barry Bonds. Every team had scouting reports. Every team had plans. Every team had ideas. The problem was that Barry had a way of making all those plans seem a little less convincing once he stepped into the batter's box. What always impressed me wasn't the power. Everybody talks about the power. What impressed me was how rarely he gave a pitcher what he wanted. A lot of great hitters can be tempted into chasing a pitch. A lot of great hitters get impatient. Barry didn't do that very often. He made you work for everything. I remember standing on the mound and realizing that one bad pitch could change the entire game. That's true against a lot of hitters, but with Barry, you felt it every single time he came to the plate. There was no relaxing. There was no taking a pitch off mentally. You had to be locked in from the first pitch to the last. One thing people don't always understand is how much players respect intelligence. Talent gets attention, but intelligence earns respect. Barry understood pitchers. You could see it. He understood counts. He understood situations. And sometimes it felt like he understood what you were trying to do before you did it. That's what made him so difficult. I remember looking around stadiums when Barry walked to the plate, fans would stand up, people would stop talking, the entire atmosphere changed. Not many players can do that. Whether you were a teammate, an opponent, or a fan, you knew something important might happen. The older I got, the more I appreciated how rare that is. When I think about Barry Bonds now, I don't think about statistics first. I think about the challenge. I think about the concentration it took to face him. And I think about a player who forced every pitcher in baseball to bring their absolute best. That's why Barry Bonds will always be one of the players I admired most. The first time I saw Nolan Ryan, I was still a young pitcher trying to figure out how to survive in the major leagues. Like a lot of players my age, I'd heard the stories long before I ever met him. Everybody had a Nolan Ryan story. Somebody would talk about the fastball. Somebody else would talk about the strikeouts. Then another player would tell a story that somehow sounded even more unbelievable than the last one. The funny thing was, when you finally watched him pitch, the stories didn't seem exaggerated at all. They seemed accurate. What always fascinated me was how different we were as pitchers. Nolan could overpower hitters. I couldn't. He could make a hitter look late even when the hitter knew the fastball was coming. I spent most of my career trying to make hitters guess wrong. Completely different approaches. But I always admired the way he competed. Every time Nolan took the mound, it felt personal. Not in an angry way. In a competitive way, he wanted to win every battle, every inning, every game. And people felt that. I remember talking with players who had faced him, and they all seemed to describe the same thing. There was a seriousness about him, a belief that the game mattered, and that every pitch deserved his full attention. I respected that. The other thing I admired was how long he did it. Baseball changes fast. Players come and go. Teams change. Generations change. Yet year after year, Nolan Ryan was still there, still competing, still challenging hitters, still refusing to give anything away. The older I got, the more impressive that became, because staying great is harder than becoming great. When I think about Nolan now, I don't think about a specific game or a specific record. I think about a pitcher who represented everything people love about competition. Toughness, pride, dedication, the willingness to keep going long after most people would have stopped. And if somebody asked me to picture a major league pitcher standing on a mound, there's a good chance the first image that would come to mind would be Nolan Ryan. That's why, out of all the players I admired during my career, Nolan Ryan is the name that ends up at number one. Looking back now, I realize how lucky I was. Baseball gave me a chance to travel the country, compete at the highest level, and spend my life doing something I loved. But when you've been away from the game for a while, you start noticing something. The memories that stay with you aren't always the ones you expect. You remember people. You remember conversations in the clubhouse. You remember opponents who challenged you. You remember players who made you stop and appreciate just how good this game can be. That's what happened when I thought about this list. Tony Gwynn made me appreciate preparation. Cal Ripken Jr. reminded me what consistency looks like. Ken Griffey Jr. showed everyone that greatness and joy can exist together. Barry Bonds challenged pitchers in ways very few hitters ever have. And Nolan Ryan represented the competitive spirit that every player respects. They were all different personalities, different styles, different careers, but every one of them left an impression on me that never really faded. Years pass, stadiums change, careers end, yet some names stay with you forever. For me, these are 5 of those names. And when I think about the players I admired the most, these are the players that immediately come to mind. Not because somebody told me they were great, not because of statistics, because I saw them with my own eyes. I competed against them. I learned from them. And I was fortunate enough to share a field with them. After all these years, that's something I'll always be grateful for. Thanks for listening. I'll see you next time.